General Hospital spoilers reveal that Port Charles had always weathered chaos, but never before had the city felt this kind of quiet, suffocating control, an invisible noose tightening with each passing day. What was once seen as a simple mayoral campaign had now evolved into a battle for dominance that transcended politics. It became personal. It became psychological. The temporary absence of Laura Collins, a long-standing pillar of integrity and leadership, created more than a void in City Hall. It became the spark that ignited an inferno of ambition. And at the center of that fire stood Ezra Bole, no longer just a candidate, but a force of will determined to reshape the city in his image. His actions were not flamboyant or attention-seeking. He worked in layers, weaving his influence into the city's bloodstream with alarming precision. From the moment Laura stepped away, be it for mourning her mother or retreating for personal clarity, Ezra began maneuvering through the cracks, presenting himself as the only answer to a city plagued by instability. He framed himself not just as an alternative but as the savior of a place he claimed was teetering on collapse. What the people didn't see was the hunger behind his calm exterior, a hunger that was rapidly metastasizing into something far more dangerous than political ambition. It was obsession, and it was growing unchecked. He started with public appearances, not aggressive ones, but curated moments of sincerity and concern, showing up where Laura did not, speaking on issues she was absent for, crafting a narrative that her silence meant disinterest. Slowly, he began to insert himself into spaces Laura once occupied with ease. Town halls, charity events, press releases, all began to bear Ezra's voice. He was everywhere, and he spoke as if he already wore the mantle of power. Jordan Ashford, whose sense of duty remained unwavering, began to notice the shift not just in public sentiment but in the infrastructure of the city's power dynamics. Departments that once answered directly to her were now hesitant. Meetings she was scheduled to attend were mysteriously cancelled or moved. Initiatives she supported suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. It wasn't just Laura who was being erased. It was the entire framework of balanced governance. Ezra wasn't campaigning anymore. He was conquering. What made Ezra particularly dangerous was his patience. He didn't demand authority, he made others believe he deserved it. He allowed fear and uncertainty to do the heavy lifting. He let the city fall into quiet disorder just enough that his promise of structure sounded appealing. He let the people feel alone just enough that his presence felt necessary. He did not shout. He whispered. And in those whispers, he rewrote the story of Port Charles with himself at the center. While Jordan pushed back, she found herself increasingly isolated. Her warnings were dismissed as political bias. Her investigations were stalled without reason. Even within the police force, loyalty had begun to fracture. Officers who once stood firmly behind her began questioning her motives, subtly influenced by the new narrative that Ezra's team had so carefully planted. Ezra had not only infiltrated the city's politics, he had infiltrated its perception of truth. Laura, watching all of this unfold from a distance, felt the sting of powerlessness like never before. She had always led with transparency, with compassion, and with a belief that the people of Port Charles would recognize integrity when they saw it. But integrity doesn't stand a chance against obsession masquerading as hope. She realized too late that by stepping away, even temporarily, she had allowed a monster to position himself as a messiah. Ezra's obsession wasn't just with winning, it was with eliminating the past. He did not want to share power. He wanted to erase all memory of anyone who had ever held it before him. Laura became a relic. Jordan became an obstacle. Anyone who did not align with his vision became irrelevant. And that vision was spreading, not because it was revolutionary, but because it was relentless. Ezra began to implement subtle but insidious changes. Committees were reshaped. Community leaders were quietly replaced. Long-standing civic programs were defunded in favor of new Ezra-approved initiatives. He framed these changes as necessary progress, as modernization, as efficiency. But behind each decision was a dismantling of safeguards, a consolidation of influence. He wasn't building a better Port Charles. He was building one that obeyed him. And the scariest part was that the public didn't see it. To them, Ezra was decisive, articulate, present. He was everything they thought they needed. And Laura, no matter how truthful or heartfelt her return might be, couldn't penetrate the wall of carefully curated belief he had constructed around himself. She returned to a city that still bore her name on the ballots but no longer remembered her voice. She stood on a debate stage and pleaded for reason, for memory, for vigilance. But Ezra, with a smile as calm as ice, asked a single question about her repeated absences and the room turned. The seeds he planted had fully bloomed. When the election results came in, it was not shock that greeted Laura, it was silence. The kind of silence that comes not from betrayal, but from quiet acquiescence. Ezra didn't steal the vote. He seduced it. And once he had it, he wasted no time. Laura was formally replaced, her staff removed, her allies pushed to the fringes. Jordan, stripped of her informal authority, began to operate in the shadows, holding secret meetings with those who still believed in the old Port Charles. She knew now that the battle had shifted. It was no longer about the office of mayor, it was about the survival of the city's soul. Ezra's grip tightened. Surveillance proposals were drafted and passed. Financial oversight was weakened. Ezra began replacing public advisors with private consultants. Programs for community feedback were reduced in the name of efficiency. Dissent was painted as sabotage. The media, once diverse in opinion, began to speak with a single voice. Even the streets felt different. Orderly. Predictable. Empty. This was not reform. This was reconditioning. And the man at the center, once a candidate, now a self-anointed prophet of progress, moved through City Hall like a man possessed by a vision no one else was allowed to question. Jordan's warnings became more urgent but less heard. She found herself followed, monitored, her communications interrupted. The very systems she once trusted were no longer hers to command. She met with Laura in secret, the two women acknowledging the grim reality. Ezra didn't want to lead. He wanted to consume. And now, his obsession had metastasized into every corner of Port Charles's civic body. It wasn't just control he craved, it was permanence. His name on every policy, his voice in every broadcast, his ideology in every classroom, every council meeting, every neighborhood committee. The city was becoming a monument to his fixation. Laura, no longer mayor but not yet defeated, committed to a new form of resistance. She and Jordan would fight from the margins, gathering what few allies remained, documenting the erosion of democracy in real time. They would watch, wait, and prepare. Because obsessions, no matter how carefully curated, always reveal themselves in the end. Ezra believed himself untouchable, inevitable. But Laura knew better. She had seen the fall of men who thought themselves kings. And she would be there, when the cracks finally appeared, ready to remind Port Charles of the truth it had forgotten. Until then, she would carry the burden of knowing that the city she once led had surrendered not to hope, but to a man's darkness dressed in the language of salvation. Ezra is becoming the most unsettling force lurking beneath the surface of Port Charles, a man whose calm demeanor masks a vault of secrets so deep and dangerous they threaten to unravel the very fabric of the city's power structure. He doesn't speak in outbursts or make grand declarations, but every calculated step he takes is laced with knowledge. Private information about individuals in power, long-buried betrayals, hidden alliances, and criminal arrangements that were meant to stay sealed forever. Ezra holds the keys to every shadow Port Charles has tried to forget, and he's using them not for justice, but for domination. The rise of this influence is not simply political, it's psychological. One of the most disturbing obsessions now gripping the city is rooted in the idea that Ezra doesn't want to clean the system. He wants to become it, reshape it in his image, and keep everyone in fear of the secrets he controls. This haunting energy that surrounds him has begun to twist the natural order of Port Charles. Institutions that once thrived on loyalty and honor now cower beneath the weight of speculation and paranoia. People who used to walk freely with confidence now glance over their shoulders, wondering if Ezra knows their sins. The surge of this new dread has awakened something deeply unstable. As one of the most terrifying revelations begins to unfold, a betrayal buried in the heart of the city, possibly involving connections between law enforcement, the mob, and even the mayor's office. Ezra is ready to step forward as the face of change, branding himself as the answer to the chaos he secretly amplified. But this transformation is not just political theater. It is a strategic annihilation of rivals cloaked in the narrative of reform. The closer Ezra gets to the mayoral office, the clearer it becomes that this is not just a campaign, it is a hostile takeover, a silent coup. And those with the most to lose are Jason and Sunny. Their empires, carefully constructed in the gray space between legality and necessity, have survived because of balance, trust, and the unspoken boundaries they've respected for years. Ezra threatens all of that. He is not just a threat to their control. He is a direct challenge to their identities, their histories, their legacies. Ezra is not afraid of Jason's silence or Sunny's reputation. He has studied them. He knows what they protect, whom they protect, and where their weaknesses lie. He knows about blood spilled in backrooms, about alliances made in desperation, and about the silent wars waged under the surface of peace. His rise to power is not just a political shift, it is a deliberate destabilization of everything Jason and Sunny built. And what makes this truly catastrophic is that neither man saw it coming until it was already too late. The shocking discovery of a confidential file linking Ezra to a decades-old cover-up has sent a chill through the city, especially when it suggests that he might have been pulling strings long before he ever ran for office. Ties to shadow operatives, surveillance networks, and financial flows connected to old Cassadine schemes now circle his name. If these connections are true, Ezra isn't just a dangerous candidate, he may be the architect of a long-running orchestration to dismantle the existing power blocks in Port Charles. And now, with Laura absent, Jordan outmaneuvered, and the public misled by his charisma, Ezra is poised to ascend into official control with no one strong enough to stop him from within the system. Jason, known for staying in the shadows, now finds himself forced to reckon with a figure who manipulates the darkness better than he ever could. Ezra doesn't need an army, he has fear. He has influence. He has truths so explosive that even a whisper could destroy decades of order. Sunny, who has spent his life walking the line between protector and enforcer, now faces the grim realization that his brand of power no longer intimidates a man like Ezra. Because Ezra isn't looking for a deal. He's looking for domination. And with each passing day, he is eroding the alliances that kept Sunny safe. Those who once backed Sunny are beginning to fall silent, not because they've lost faith, but because they've been compromised. Ezra has the receipts, and he is preparing to use them. The horrifying part is that no one knows the full extent of what Ezra possesses. Every day brings the possibility of a new revelation, a new betrayal, a new trap that cannot be escaped. He is not fueled by greed or revenge. He is fueled by vision, a dark, obsessive vision of a Port Charles stripped of the old order, rebuilt in the image of absolute control. His campaign slogan speaks of renewal, of justice, but behind that language is an agenda of conquest. And while the city cheers for change, Jason and Sunny stand at the precipice of annihilation, not by war, but by precision. Not by brute force, but by exposure. Ezra isn't just a new mayor. He's a ticking bomb of secrets, and when he finally unleashes everything he knows, Port Charles may not survive the explosion. One of the most chilling developments unfolding in Port Charles is the rapid convergence of two increasingly dangerous forces, Ezra and Sidwell. Separately, they were already unsettling presences, each cloaked in mystery, moving through corridors of influence with eerie calm and unnerving precision. But together, they have begun to form a gravitational pull so intense that it has started to distort everything around them. What once seemed like political maneuvering has now twisted into something more sinister, an obsession with control, domination, and psychological warfare. Their growing partnership isn't built on friendship or loyalty, but on shared hunger for power and an uncanny understanding of how to manipulate fear, secrets, and silence. They are not bound by morality or traditional rules of politics. They are bound by obsession. And that obsession is beginning to consume Port Charles from the inside out. Ezra, with his cold intelligence and calculated charm, has already begun to dismantle the city's traditional power structures. Sidwell, with his shadowy business ties, criminal connections, and ruthless sense of strategy, acts as the enforcer behind the throne, never public, never questioned, but always watching. Together, they form a perfect storm of political facade and underground muscle. And what makes this pairing all the more terrifying is that neither of them believes in compromise. They believe in conquest. They believe in eliminating resistance, not negotiating with it. What is now unfolding is not just a campaign or a corruption scandal. It is the rise of a new kind of rule, forged in obsession, perfected through manipulation, and driven by a shared desire to leave nothing standing from the old world of Port Charles. As Laura remains out of the public eye, and as Jordan tries and fails to contain the spread of influence infecting the city's leadership, Ezra and Sidwell move more boldly. Their hands may not always be visible, but their fingerprints are everywhere. On policy changes that strip oversight from key departments, on silent purges within law enforcement, on the sudden closures of long-standing civic programs. These aren't just administrative decisions. They are surgical strikes designed to isolate, weaken, and dismantle the core values Port Charles was built on. And yet to the public, it's all being sold as progress. Efficiency. Renewal. But beneath that surface is something far darker. A coordinated psychological campaign to break the city's resistance and replace it with total submission. People are beginning to feel it, even if they can't name it. A growing unease in the streets. A hesitation to speak freely. A sudden vanishing of familiar faces from city affairs. Those who once held sway now find themselves sidelined or silenced, while those who speak in favor of Ezra and Sidwell seem to rise inexplicably fast. Businesses are aligning themselves with this new regime not out of faith, but out of fear. Civic leaders are self-censoring. Journalists once fearless are now offering only surface-level stories, ignoring the deeper corruption simmering below. And all the while, Ezra maintains his public persona of calm, composed leadership, while Sidwell remains the unseen architect behind the chaos. What's worse is that this growing obsession isn't contained, it's contagious. People once considered pillars of the community are slowly being drawn into their orbit, either through seduction, blackmail, or sheer survival instinct. And as more influential voices fall under their spell or vanish from the stage entirely, the city begins to feel less like a community and more like a machine. Cold. Efficient. Controlled. The madness is not loud, not explosive, it's quiet, systematic, and terrifyingly effective. It is psychological warfare carried out with surgical precision. But obsession has a price, and as Ezra and Sidwell push further into uncharted territory, the speed at which things unravel grows exponentially. Their need to dominate every aspect of Port Charles' life has become insatiable. No decision can be made without their approval. No appointment can happen without their blessing. No dissent can be tolerated. And because they are not motivated by ideology or justice but by personal obsession, there are no boundaries they won't cross. They don't just want to win, they want to own. They want to possess. And that kind of hunger never stops growing. One of the most shocking shifts in recent days is how quickly the public narrative has changed. Ezra's mayoral campaign, once viewed with caution, is now surrounded by an eerie sense of inevitability. Sidwell's name, once only whispered in backroom deals, now appears in formal city documents as an advisor. The two of them have become living specters. Present in every decision, every boardroom, every whisper. And the more visible they become, the more normalized their control seems, which in itself is a devastating psychological victory. The people of Port Charles are beginning to accept their rule as the new reality, and resistance is shrinking. Those still willing to fight, Jason, Sonny, Jordan, and a few others, are running out of time and resources. The war has changed. It is no longer being fought with fists or guns or public rallies. It is being fought with information, with secrets, with betrayal, and with fear. And Ezra and Sidwell are winning because they don't fear the consequences of their actions. They fear only failure. Their obsession with reshaping the city is not a phase, it is the core of their identity. Every move they make is guided by an unspoken pact that nothing, and no one, will stand in their way. And the more their power grows, the more the city descends into madness. Not the chaotic kind, but the organized kind, where every street lamp shines for their agenda, every law passed protects their rise, and every voice of dissent is met with silence or ruin. This is not a moment of temporary instability. This is the beginning of a new era, forged in obsession, ruled by paranoia, and destined to end in catastrophe unless someone stops it. But with each passing hour, Ezra and Sidwell dig deeper, and their grip on Port Charles tightens. The city is no longer theirs to win. It is theirs to burn if anyone dares take it back.